Have you ever wondered how much you're really spending to bring a new customer in the door? In today's episode, we're breaking down the formula to calculate your customer acquisition costs like a seasoned CFO. You'll discover why most bars drastically underestimate what they're spending, how to determine when a customer actually becomes profitable, and a simple 3-to-1 ratio that ensures sustainable growth. This is math that is going to help separate you from those bar owners who are struggling. Hello and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. Before we get started, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Spot On, who provide a great modern POS solution for the bar and restaurant industry, and Starfish, who use AI to turn your books into actionable steps to increase profits. So today we're going to dive into a different KPI than what we've talked about before, customer acquisition cost. So that's the actual dollars and cents behind acquiring a customer. And then we can use that to calculate when a customer becomes profitable and look at lifetime value so that we can make smarter marketing decisions. Now, if we're real honest, most bars don't track customer acquisition costs. And as a matter of fact, I don't even track it with a lot of my clients. But when we're talking about marketing and really honing in on, is your marketing effective, customer acquisition cost is a great metric to use. Now, this is something that they use in a lot of industries. It can be particularly difficult to measure in hospitality, and we'll talk about why that's true and how you can get around that. But customer acquisition cost, right? What does it cost us to make a regular? And that's something we want to figure out. So if you don't have clarity on customer acquisition cost, you could be spending more money on your marketing than you're actually getting out of your customers, and in turn losing money and not realizing it. But by the end of this episode, we'll give you a simple framework to calculate your customer acquisition cost, your CAC. We'll track that acquisition payback period and give you tools to ensure your marketing is profitable rather than just causing you to spend a lot of money that you're not getting back. So first of all, what is customer acquisition cost? How do we calculate customer acquisition cost? Well, it's pretty basic from a formulaic standpoint. We take our total marketing spend and we divide that by our number of new customers. And that tells us what our acquisition cost is. Now, there are a few caveats there. A, what is total marketing spend? And how do we even know how many new customers we have? So total marketing spend is going to be the sum of all of our marketing efforts. So that's going to be direct advertising cost. And that's where a lot of people stop, but also you need to include your labor for social media, your time spent designing your promotions, any staff that you're dedicating to events or promotions. And we want to allocate a percentage of our overhead. So our rent, our utilities, management time, all of that we want to factor into acquisition. Now, how do you figure out how much of that overhead to allocate? Well, what I like to do for anything like this is follow the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid. So how do we apply the KISS principle? This is getting into some really complex accounting. What I would tend to do is say, okay, if advertising makes up 3.5% of my total expenses, then I want to allocate 3.5% of things like rent and utilities and management time towards that amount. Now, we also want to make sure that we're tracking across all of our different channels or different ways that we're trying to get guests. So maybe you're doing social media. What does it cost you to bring in a guest from your social media? What does it cost you to bring in a guest via a referral program? Or what does it cost you to bring in a guest from an event? Now, you just set up a spreadsheet and you just start to monitor this. And again, because we're trying to figure out that total marketing spend number and we're trying to figure out number of new customers, and we're just dividing one by the other. So it's pretty easy to track. That total marketing spend is not that hard to define. But then we have the problem of, how do we determine the number of new customers we have? Well, that can be difficult. If you're using a reservation system, if you take reservations, it's actually quite a bit easier because you know whether or not someone's a returning guest or not based on that reservation. So you can always use that and just kind of extrapolate out, okay, my reservations, 18% of all reservations are new guests this week. Probably 18% of your walk-ins are close to being new guests as well, right? We can just kind of pull that over and make that assumption. The other thing you can do is, if you have a loyalty program, look at how many people signed up, right? But that's not always a great indicator. If you're using Toast or spot on. Some of these more modern POS systems, they have ways to track this for you and to help you determine this number, but it can be really difficult. You can even just do it based on a survey, right? A sample. So if you go around and every night you do your table touches, and what percentage of those people are new guests versus returning guests? Once you have that percentage down, you can extrapolate that that's probably a real percentage, as long as you're doing your table touches and getting this data 4 or 5 nights a week, because that's going to give you the information you need in order to calculate the number of new guests you have. So once we know our customer acquisition cost, again, our total marketing cost divided by the number of new customers we have, then we want to look at the acquisition payback period. So how many visits does it take for a new customer to become profitable? So let's just say, for example, your average ticket size is $100, because that'll give us easy math, and your profit margin is 15%. Let's say you're doing really well. So $100, you make 15 bucks. So our customer profit contribution per visit is that $15. If the math is not as easy, we would just take average ticket size, that $100, multiply it by the 15, we get 15, right? So if your average was 30 bucks, you'd have a different answer. But that's the math that we use to get there. So then we want to divide our customer acquisition cost by that profit contribution to determine our payback period. So let's say our customer acquisition cost was $45 and we make $15 on average per ticket. So it's going to take 3 visits for that guest to pay for the marketing that we spent to bring them in the door. And that's why this becomes so important to understand these numbers, because that's how you're going to be able to see if your marketing efforts, yeah, they might be working. Yes, they might be bringing new people in the door, but are they actually making you more profitable? So well-acquired customers should become profitable in about 90 days. Just walk-ins, people off the street, people that just organically become your regulars, you're probably looking at more like 180 days there. But for our well-acquired customers, for the customers that we're trying to track here and bring in, we want to get that back within 90 days. So essentially, you want to target 3 or 4 visits, and you want to get those 3 visits in 90 days. That's kind of how I like to look at it. 3 visits, 90 days, once a month. Now, everything beyond that, I'm making money. And as we've talked about before, 3 visits is generally what it takes to create a regular. So you can use your POS system to track visit frequency. And depending on your POS system, there's different ways you can do this. You can use a reservation system if you have that to track visit frequency. But again, some of this you may just have to take some guesses or extrapolate from a smaller sample size what that full data set would look like. You want to strategically time your follow-up marketing if you can. So if you're getting people's emails when they come in to eat, you need to get them back once a month for 3 months to cover the cost that you spent to bring them in the door. Then you need to strategically time and plan out your marketing so that you're going to hit that, right? We want to always market to what we know we need to do to make money. Now, you can also reduce your payback period here by increasing guest average or improving your retention strategies, right? So some number of those folks that come in once are not going to come in all 3 times for us to make our money back. That's obviously going to add to how long it takes us to get our marketing funds back. But you can increase your guest check average, or you can improve retention, improve the number of customer visits you're getting, and either of those are going to decrease that payback period. But it's very important to understand how many times a guest needs to come in for you to actually make money on that guest, not just marketing spend being the reason that you have that guest coming in and you're not actually making money, you're spending money. So finally, we want to look at customer lifetime value. Now, customer lifetime value is going to be your average visit value times your average number of visits times your average customer lifespan. And as a golden rule here, we don't want our customer acquisition cost to exceed more than 1/3 of our customer lifetime value. That's where we get this 3-to-1 ratio. So our customer lifetime value should be 3 times our customer acquisition cost. That's how we're going to ensure that you stay profitable with your marketing. Now, again, we want to track this ratio. It's going to change based upon acquisition channel, how we're bringing them in. And so this is where a nice tracking spreadsheet comes back into play. But the big thing here that I just want everyone to understand, customer acquisition cost, your marketing, all in, your total marketing spend, not just what you spend on the actual advertising, divided by the number of new guests that come in. And then you determine what is that payback period. And finally, that's this customer lifetime value. Average visit value times average number of visits times customer lifespan. And You want to make sure, again, your customer lifetime value to customer acquisition cost is always a 3-to-1 ratio. Really profitable bars that are going to do really well, that's a 5-to-1 ratio or better. So they're spending 20% of what they expect to make on that guest to bring them in the door. Now, we've covered 3 essential metrics that you need to understand to track the effectiveness of your marketing today. So remember, those are your customer acquisition costs across all channels involving all the money that you can, or all the money that actually gets spent, your acquisition payback period, and your customer lifetime value. So when you implement this strategy and you start to measure this, right, we want to get that down low. And ideally here, just to throw out a target for you, customer acquisition cost, you probably want around 35, 40 bucks. That's about as high as you ever want to go in this industry. That customer lifetime value, then you want to see that you can make $100, $200, $300 off of them lifetime. And remember, if you have regulars and new guests, you always need about 20% new guests. So this is how we monitor this is how we measure it, and this is how we ensure that our marketing is profitable and that our bar is sustainable for the long term.
That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.